Josephine Calloway threw her body backward with everything she had. But Silas Rourke's hand stayed locked around her wrist like iron. His mouth came down hard on hers in front of the whole town, and half of Laramie watched it happen like it was a show they had paid to see. She tasted whiskey. She tasted shame. Then a voice cut the air like a rifle shot. "Get your hands off that lady. Before you see what happens next, please subscribe to the channel. Follow this story to the end and comment the city you are watching from so I can see how far my story has traveled." She did not scream. That was the first thing Josephine Calloway would remember later when she tried to put the afternoon into the shape of a thing that had happened to her. She had not made a single sound. Her throat had locked shut the instant Silas Rourke's fingers closed on her wrist, and her voice, her whole careful, educated Boston voice, had gone somewhere she could not find. Vaughn Daniels said it again, quieter this time, and somehow the quiet was worse. "I said get your hands off that lady." Silas let go. Not because he wanted to, because the man speaking had the kind of steadiness in his voice that did not belong to anyone asking twice. Josephine stumbled back a full step. Her hat had fallen. Her hair pinned up so careful that mourning hung loose at her neck. She pressed the back of her wrist hard against her mouth, and she would not look at the people on the wooden walk behind her. "Aw, hell, Vaughn," Silas drawled, and he smiled wide so everyone could see the smile. "I was just welcoming the new schoolmarm. Ain't no harm in a welcome." "Step back from her. She's a pretty thing. You noticed. Don't tell me you didn't notice." "Step back." Silas took the step. Just the one. He was 26 years old and the only son of Alden Rourke, who owned near half the grazing land between Laramie and the Platte River, and he had been told no exactly 3 times in his life, and every one of those times the answer had come around to yes in the end. "Ma'am," Vaughn said, and his voice was a different thing now. Softer, careful the way a man is careful around a startled horse. "Can you walk?" Josephine tried to speak. Nothing came. "Not if you can walk, ma'am." She nodded. "Come on then, slow, this way." He did not touch her. She noticed it afterwards and held on to it like a small warm coin she had pocketed without meaning to. He did not touch her, not even the elbow, not even a guiding hand at the small of her back. He simply turned and walked 1/2 step ahead of her and let her choose whether to follow. She followed. Behind her, Silas Rourke called out loud enough that every soul on the street would hear. "See you at the schoolhouse, Miss Calloway." "Oh, I'll see you real soon." She flinched like he had swung at her. Vaughn did not look back. "Here," he said, when they had walked 2 full blocks and the worst of the stairs were behind them. "Sit a minute." "I cannot sit here, mister. I do not even know your name." "Vaughn Daniels. I run the Rocking D 6 miles west of town. Miss Calloway. Josephine Calloway." "I know, ma'am." "You know." "Whole town knew you were comin' in Tuesday. New schoolteacher from back east. Boarded at the Dowd place. Folks around here don't get much new to talk about." "And now they shall have a great deal to talk about." "Yes, ma'am. I reckon they shall." She looked at him then, full on. He was lean and sun-dark and perhaps 30 years old, and there was nothing soft about his face, but there was nothing cruel about it either, and she found that combination so unusual in a man that she stared a beat longer than was polite. "Mr. Daniels." "Ma'am." "I cannot sit down. If I sit down, I will shake, and if I shake, I will cry, and if I cry in this street, I will not be able to walk into that schoolhouse on Monday morning. Do you understand?" "I understand, ma'am." "Then do not ask me to sit." He nodded once. "Then we'll walk you home, Miss Calloway, at whatever pace suits you. Slow then. Slow it is."
Batamiche.
Mr. Peterson caught up with them half a block from the Dowd place, puffing like a bellows and red, clear to the tips of his ears. He had been at the feed store when the commotion started. By the time he reached Main Street and heard the news, by the time he ran back, the street was empty, and the town was already telling 3 different versions of the story. Miss Calloway, for the love of mercy, what in heaven has happened? Mr. Peterson, I am not hurt. I heard there was some manner of... I am not hurt, sir. Daniels. Peterson rounded on Vaughn. Daniels, you tell me straight. What did that boy do? What he does, Mr. Peterson? In daylight, in front of God and everyone. In daylight, in front of everyone. Jumbo. Peterson looked like he might sit down in the dust of the road. He was 62 years old, chairman of the school board and a Methodist who had never so much as raised his voice to a woman in all his days. He fumbled at the chain of his pocket watch. Miss Calloway, I must think on what is to be done. The board will have to be informed. The board will have to be informed of what Mr. Peterson... The question stopped him cold. He opened his mouth and closed it again. Of what Mr. Peterson? Because in a town such as this, the reputation of a schoolteacher... The reputation. She said the word like it was a stone she was setting down. You mean, sir, the board will have to be informed whether I encouraged him. Miss Calloway, I never... Is that not what you mean? I mean only that the board must be told the facts. Then tell them the facts, sir. Tell them I had been in this town for 1 full day. Tell them I was walking to the post office. Tell them a stranger put his hand upon me and his mouth upon me, and I did not invite it, and I did not welcome it, and I did not know his Christian name until Mr. Daniels here spoke it aloud. Tell them those facts, Mr. Peterson. And then you ask your board what it is they intend to do. Peterson stared at her. Vaughn Daniels, just a half step behind her shoulder, did not say a word, but his jaw had set. Yes, Miss Calloway, Peterson said at last. Yes, those facts. I will tell them those. Good evening, Mr. Peterson. Good evening, Miss Calloway. He tipped his hat and went. She watched him until he had turned the corner. Only then did she let out the breath she had been holding. Miss Calloway, Vaughn said. Please, do not. Not yet. Yes, ma'am. She did not cry when Vaughn Daniels left her at the gate of the Dowd boarding house and tipped his hat and said, Ma'am, if you ever need a thing, anything at all, you send word to the Rocking D and ask for me by name. She did not cry when Mrs. Dowd opened the front door and looked at her the way a woman looks at a stain on a tablecloth. She did not cry when she climbed the narrow stairs to the narrow room and shut the narrow door behind her. She cried into the pillow face down because she did not want the sound to carry through the thin boards of the house. She cried because she had not fought. She cried because Silas Rourke had kissed her very first kiss, and it had been stolen from her like a coin out of a purse, and she could not ever get it back. She had saved it. For 23 years she had saved it. She had been promised by her father to a banker's son in Boston named Edwin Crowell, a man 20 years her senior, with teeth like a broken fence, and her father had sat her down in the parlor on Beacon Hill and said, Edwin will have your first kiss and your last, and every kiss in between. And Josephine had said, No, father, and her father had slapped her across the face so clean her ear rang for 2 full days. The fight had ended with her on a train going west with $200 sewn into the hem of her traveling dress, and a letter of introduction to the Laramie School Board folded inside her glove. She had told herself, out there I will choose. Out there I will be the one who chooses who I am and who I love and who may touch me. And in the first hour of her first full day in Laramie, someone else had chosen for her. She cried until her chest ached. Mrs. Dowd came up an hour before supper. She did not knock. Miss Calloway, supper's at 6. Thank you, Mrs. Dowd. I am not hungry this evening. You'll come down anyway. I would prefer, Miss Calloway. The old woman stood squarely in the doorway. A girl who stays alone in her room the day after a scandal is a girl who looks guilty. You'll come down, you'll eat, you'll speak to my other boarders like a Christian woman. And tomorrow morning you'll walk the length of this street with your chin where the Lord put it. You hear? Josephine sat up slowly and pressed her knuckles to her swollen eyes. Mrs. Dowd. What? Was that advice, or was that a warning? Mrs. Dowd's face did not change, but something behind her eyes, something very old and very tired, shifted a quarter inch. Child, she said, there is no difference between the two in a town like this. Supper at 6. Wash your face. She pulled the door shut behind her. She washed her face in the basin. She repinned her hair. She buttoned her high collar to the very top button, the way her mother had taught her, the way Boston women buttoned themselves when they intended to be seen and not touched. She went down the stairs at 6 o'clock exact, and she sat at the long plank table, and she ate 4 bites of boiled beef and 3 bites of potato, and she did not look any one of the 3 men boarders full in the face. A drummer from St. Louis named Mr. Harless tried to be friendly. Miss Calloway, I heard you had yourself a fright today. I am quite well, thank you, Mr. Harless. Silas Rourke's a pill, if you'll pardon my saying so. I would rather not discuss it, sir. Sure. I only meant... Thank you, Mr. Harless. The second boarder, a clerk at the feed store, cleared his throat into his coffee cup. Folks'll forget it by Sunday, miss. Nothing sticks around here for long. How comforting that is to hear. The third boarder said nothing at all. He was a thin man with a drooping mustache, and he looked at her over the rim of his coffee cup in a way that made her put down her fork. She did not ask his name. She did not want his name. After supper, she went back up the stairs and sat on the edge of the narrow bed and stared at the wallpaper until the dark came down. A little past 9 o'clock, she heard hooves in the yard, then a voice she already knew. Mrs. Dowd. Evening, ma'am. Mr. Daniels. This is late. I know it, ma'am. I wondered if I might speak a moment with Miss Calloway. At this hour. At this hour. A long pause. Then Mrs. Dowd's voice dry as chalk. Porch only. I can see you from the kitchen window, and I will be watching every minute. Yes, ma'am. Much obliged. Josephine came down with her shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. Vaughn was standing at the bottom of the porch steps with his hat in his hand. He was not looking at the house. When he heard the door, he turned, and then he waited, and she realized after a moment that he was waiting for her permission to come up the step. She nodded once. He came up. I will not keep you, ma'am. All right. I came to tell you that Silas Rourke will not be troubling you again. You cannot promise me that Mr. Daniels... No, ma'am, I cannot. But his father has been spoken to. By you. By me. What did you say to him? I told him, Vaughn said slowly, that if his boy lays a hand on you again, or on any woman in this town, I will ride out to his ranch myself, and I will settle it personal. Mr. Daniels. Ma'am? That sounds very close to a threat. Yes, ma'am. It was one. Mamie. She did not know what to say to that. She had been raised on Beacon Hill to believe that good men did not threaten other men. She had been raised on Beacon Hill to believe a great many things. Why? She asked him finally. Why what, ma'am? Why did you do what you did today on that street? Why are you standing on this porch tonight? I am a stranger to you, Mr. Daniels. A stranger. He turned his hat over in his hands. Twice. 3 times. When he spoke, he did not look at her. There was a woman once, he said. Not here, back in Kansas. My sister, in fact. Delia. She was 17 years old, and there were some men in our county who thought about her the way Silas Rourke thought about you this afternoon. And I was 12 miles away on a horse that was not fast enough. and I was 12 miles too late. Mr. Daniels. She lived, ma'am. I don't want you thinking she died. She lived, but she was not my Delia after. She went back east to an aunt in Ohio, and I have not seen her in 9 years, and when I write to her, she does not write back. So when I heard this afternoon that a drunk boy had grabbed the new schoolteacher in broad daylight on Main Street, I did what I should have done in Kansas. And I would do it again, ma'am. I would do it 100 times again. Josephine's eyes filled. She did not let them fall. Mr. Daniels, I am so very sorry. Don't be sorry for me, Miss Calloway. Be careful. That's all I came here to say. Silas Rourke is a spoiled boy, but his daddy Alden is not a spoiled man. Alden Rourke is the kind of man who hears a threat and does not answer it. He waits. He remembers faces. He takes his time. So you be careful. And if any hand in this county tries what was tried today, you get word to me. Any way you can manage, I will come. You do not owe me that. Ma'am, Vaughn said. I reckon I do. He put his hat back on. He tipped it once. He went down the porch steps and into the dark, and a minute later she heard the hooves going away down the road toward the west. She stood at the porch rail until there was no sound left at all. She did not sleep. Somewhere past 2 in the morning, she lit the little oil lamp on the writing desk, and she opened the small leather case she had brought all the way from Boston, and she took out the letter she had not yet unsealed. The letter had been waiting for her at the boarding house that very morning when she had first arrived with her trunk. Mrs. Dowd had handed it to her along with the room key. Josephine had seen the handwriting on the envelope, and her stomach had gone cold as a stone in a creek, and she had slipped the letter into her leather case without a word, and not looked at it again. Now she broke the seal. It was not from her father. It was from a man named Henry Galt, attorney at law, her mother's cousin, twice removed a decent man, and the only one in the family who had ever been kind to her. The letter was dated 11 days past. It said, Miss Calloway, this comes to you in strictest confidence. Your father has engaged a Chicago agency to locate your whereabouts. As of this writing, the agent has determined you may have traveled as far as Cheyenne. I believe it is a matter of weeks, not of months before he has the name of your town. I have done what little I can to delay this information. I cannot delay it indefinitely. Please consider, dear Josephine, what steps you must take when he arrives. And he will arrive. Yours in friendship and in discretion, H. Galt. Josephine read the letter 3 times over. Then she folded it very small and she pushed it down to the bottom of the leather case beneath the linen handkerchiefs and the little daguerreotype of her mother, and she blew out the lamp. She sat in the dark. She thought of Silas Rourke's mouth and the taste of whiskey upon her own. She thought of Vaughn Daniels saying I would do it 100 times again. She thought of her father in his high-backed chair in the parlor on Beacon Hill, saying the word Edwin as though it were a law written into the walls of the house, and she thought of Edwin Crowell's teeth, and she thought of the train going west with the prairie rolling out, and she thought of every small choice she had made to carry herself from that parlor to this narrow bed in this narrow room in this narrow western town where her first kiss had been taken from her in broad daylight before she had ever had the chance to give it freely. No, she said aloud into the dark of the little room. It was not a prayer. It was not a wish. It was the first word of something else. No. Dawn came up gray, and Josephine was already dressed. Then she had not slept an hour. She had pinned her hair 3 separate times because the first 2 times her hands had shaken too much to do the work clean. She had chosen the dark gray Sunday dress with the high collar and the long sleeves, the plainest thing she owned, and she had made her face in the small oval mirror into the face of a woman who had nothing to apologize for. Mrs. Dowd was at the stove when Josephine came down. "You eaten this morning?" "Yes, Mrs. Dowd." "Good. I will be going to church." The old woman turned from the stove with a skillet in one hand and studied her for a long, slow moment. "Child, you sure?" "I am sure." "You know what's sittin' in the second pew every Sunday morning of his life?" "I know." "Alden Rourke and his boy and his wife and every cousin they got." Yes, ma'am. And you intend to walk past that pew? I intend to walk past that pew. Mrs. Dowd set the skillet down. She wiped her hands on her apron slow, and she looked at Josephine the way a woman looks at another woman across the space of 40 years and a great deal of hard learning. Eat 2 eggs then, not 1, 2. Yes, Mrs. Dowd. And take the long way round. Down Pine, up Second. Make 'em watch you comin' the whole length of the street. Mrs. Dowd. What? Thank you. Don't thank me. I ain't on your side. I'm on the side of my boardin' house, and scandal is bad for business. You hold your chin up. I keep my rooms full. That's all this is. Josephine almost smiled. She did not quite manage it, but almost. Yes, Mrs. Dowd. She ate both eggs. The walk down Pine Street was the longest walk of Josephine's life. She did not look left, and she did not look right. She heard the rustle of curtains at 3 separate windows. She heard a man on the boardwalk outside the barber's stop, speaking, and then stop speaking the moment she passed. She heard a child's voice ask a question, and a mother's voice hush it. She did not slow. She did not turn her head. She walked. At the corner of Second, she nearly collided with Mr. Peterson coming the other way, and the man actually jumped back a full step as though she had been a snake in the road. Miss Calloway, good morning. Good morning, Mr. Peterson. You are going to service? I am. Miss Calloway, a word, only a word. I am on my way to church, Mr. Peterson. The board has called an emergency meeting for this afternoon, 2 o'clock, at the schoolhouse. She stopped walking then. She did turn her head then. Regarding Friday's incident. Regarding your position, Miss Calloway. We the board feels that as certain members of the board feel. Say it plain, Mr. Peterson. Certain members have raised the question of whether the school can at this juncture. Mr. Peterson. Yes. Who on the board is married to a Rourke? The silence that fell between them lasted perhaps 4 seconds. 4 seconds is a long time when a man is trying to decide whether to lie. Mrs. Amelia Rourke, Peterson said finally. Sits on the board. She is Alden's sister-in-law. She has requested the meeting. I see. Miss Calloway, I want you to know that I personally. 2 o'clock, Mr. Peterson. I shall be there. She walked past him, and she did not look back, and her knees did not fail her, though she thought for one bad moment that they might. The church was already 3/4 full when she stepped through the double doors. She did not hesitate at the threshold. Hesitation, she had decided upon the stairs that morning, was a thing she could not afford. She walked straight up the center aisle with her hymnal in her 2 gloved hands, and she took a seat in the 4th pew from the front on the left-hand side, and she laid the hymnal in her lap, and she folded her hands upon it. She did not look at the 2nd pew on the right. She did not have to. She felt Silas Rourke's eyes upon the back of her neck like a hand. The service began. The hymns were sung. Josephine sang every word without once glancing down at the book. She had been raised Episcopalian in Boston, but a Methodist hymnal was near enough, and her voice when she let it out was clear and steady and pitched a little above the voices around her, and by the 3rd hymn more than one head in the pews was turning to see who the new alto was. The Reverend Obadiah Hale climbed into the pulpit. He was a thin man, perhaps 50, with a narrow gray beard and a narrow gray voice, and he opened his Bible to a passage in the book of Proverbs, and he cleared his throat and he said, "Today I wish to speak upon the subject of modesty." Josephine did not move. Modesty, the Reverend said, in dress, modesty in manner, modesty in carriage. A woman, the Scripture tells us, who adorneth herself with a meek and quiet spirit, which is in the sight of God of great price. Someone 2 pews behind Josephine whispered something and was shushed. Dida solumam si sami, for we live, the Reverend continued. his eyes moving slow across the congregation and landing for one long breath on the fourth pew left. In a time when a certain forwardness of manner has become in some quarters mistaken for a virtue. When a woman walks abroad without proper chaperone. When a woman comes to a town not her own and takes a position of moral influence over our children, and yet carries herself in a way that... Josephine stood up. The whole church took in one breath together. She did not speak. She did not look at the reverend. She simply stood up in her pew, and she smoothed the front of her dark gray dress with her gloved hands, and she stepped out into the aisle, and she walked down the center aisle toward the double doors, with her chin exactly where the Lord had put it. At the back of the church, a man's voice said quiet but carrying, "Good for you, Miss Calloway." She did not turn to see who it was. She knew. She walked out into the morning, and she did not let herself cry until she was 3 blocks gone. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3 blocks away. He caught up with her on the edge of the churchyard. She was 3th her on the edge of the churchyard. She heard his boots on the gravel, and she did not stop. "Miss Calloway." "Mr. Daniels, please. Not now." "Yes, ma'am. I only wanted to say, please." "All right, bum." But he kept walking beside her, not touching her, not crowding her, just a half step behind at her left shoulder, the way he had walked her home on Friday, and something about the simple fact of him being there made the tears come faster, not slower, and she had to stop in the middle of the road and press both her gloved hands against her face. "Ma'am, I am so tired, Mr. Daniels." "I know it. I have been in this town 3 days." "I know it, ma'am." 3 days. Mrs. Dowd's is 2 blocks yet. "Can you make the 2 blocks?" "Yes." "Then let's make 'em." She made the 2 blocks. At the gate he stopped, because he had stopped at the gate every time, because he was the kind of man who understood that a porch was a woman's house and a gate was a woman's wall. And he took off his hat, and he said, "Miss Calloway, the board meetin' this afternoon." "You heard." "Whole town's heard. Mrs. Amelia Rourke has been to see 3 board members since sunup. I am to be dismissed." "They think so." "Will I be?" "No, ma'am." She looked up at him. "You sound very certain, Mr. Daniels." I am certain. How? He turned his hat over in his hands, twice, 3 times. Then he put it back on his head and he said, 2 o'clock, ma'am. I'll walk you over myself, with your permission. Mr. Daniels, if you walk me to that schoolhouse in front of this whole town, I know what it'll look like, ma'am. Do you? Yes, ma'am. It'll look like a man standing with a woman, and that in this town, right at this particular hour, is exactly what needs to be looked like. She stared at him a long moment. A long, long moment. 2 o'clock, she said. Yes, ma'am. He tipped his hat and went. She sat in her room and she did not eat the dinner Mrs. Dowd carried up. At 1:30 she came down the stairs dressed in the same dark gray, and Mrs. Dowd was standing at the foot of the stairs with her arms folded. He's coming for you. Yes, ma'am. Daniels. Yes. Girl. Mrs. Dowd. Vaughn Daniels ain't walked a woman anywhere in this county in 6 years. You understand me? I do not know what you mean. You will. And before Josephine could ask another question, the old woman had turned back into the kitchen and the door had shut. He came at 2:05 on foot, his horse tied at the rail of the boarding house, his hat in his hand. He did not come up on the porch. He stopped at the gate and he waited. She came out to him. Miss Calloway. Mr. Daniels. Ready. No. Good. Ready people make mistakes. Let's go. They walked the 3 blocks to the schoolhouse together, and she knew she could feel it on the back of her neck, the same way she had felt Silas Rourke's eyes in the second pew that morning, that every window on Main Street had a face in it. The schoolhouse door was open. 7 members of the board were already seated at a long trestle table that had been dragged from the back of the room. Peterson at the head. Mrs. Amelia Rourke at Peterson's right hand, her mouth set in a line so tight it was near invisible. 5 men, Josephine did not know. And standing against the back wall, arms folded, hat still on his head, Alden Rourke himself. He was perhaps 55 years old, heavy through the chest, and his face had the quiet, patient, unblinking quality of a man who has never once in his life been told to wait. Mr. Rourke, Vaughn said from the doorway, this a closed meetin'. You ain't on this board. I'm observin' Vaughn. No, sir, you ain't. The schoolhouse sits on land that my family donated to this township in 1869. I reckon I got a right to stand in it. The deed transferred to Clear Alden. You got no such right. Gentlemen? Peterson was on his feet, palms out his face, the color of boiled ham. Gentlemen, please. Mr. Rourke, I believe as a courtesy in the interest of orderly proceedings, perhaps you might wait outside. I'll stand right here, Peterson. Sir, I must insist. Stand then. Vaughn's voice cut in flat. Stand and listen. It don't matter to me. Miss Calloway, please take the chair there. Josephine took the chair. Mrs. Amelia Rourke spoke first. Her voice was thin and dry and very precise, the voice of a woman who had rehearsed what she meant to say in front of a mirror. Miss Calloway, this board has been informed of certain events on Main Street Friday last, and of your conduct at divine service this morning. It has been suggested, and I myself am inclined to agree, that the position of schoolmistress in a town such as ours requires a standard of comportment that, Mrs. Rourke. The voice was Vaughn Daniels. This ain't your turn, Vaughn. No, ma'am, I know it ain't. I'll be brief. Before this board votes on Miss Calloway's comportment, I think it ought to hear from 2 other people first. What other people? Mrs. Eulalie Sims and young Tommy Arden, both of whom were standing not 10 feet from Miss Calloway on Main Street Friday afternoon, both of whom saw the whole of it, both of whom are presently waiting out on the schoolhouse step to be called in. Mrs. Amelia Rourke's mouth opened, closed. Alden Rourke against the back wall shifted his weight for the first time since he had come in. Vaughn. Alden said low. Don't. Mr. Peterson. Vaughn said, you want to hear him or not? Peterson looked at Mrs. Amelia. Peterson looked at Alden. Peterson looked at Josephine, and something in his 62-year-old Methodist face, some small buried decent thing came up out of him for one moment and stayed up. Call them in Mr. Daniels. Eulalie Sims came in first. She was a widow of about 40, thin-faced, and she clutched her reticule at her waist as though it were a child. She told the board what she had seen. She did not flinch from the words. Silas Rourke had come out of the saloon. She said, 3/4 drunk, he had spotted Miss Calloway crossing from the dry goods store to the post office. He had crossed the street at a run. He had taken hold of her wrist, and when she had pulled back, he had taken hold of her harder, and the kiss had been no kiss at all. It had been an attack, and she, Eulalie Sims, would put her hand on the Bible right there in the schoolhouse and swear it so. Tommy Arden was 15 years old, and his voice cracked twice, but he said the same. Alden Rourke did not move from the back wall, but his jaw, which had been set, had begun to work. Mrs. Amelia Rourke's face had gone white. "Mr. Peterson," Vaughn said, "the question on the floor was Miss Calloway's comportment. I'd like to respectfully suggest the board has been asking the wrong question." "Yes," Peterson said. "Yes, I believe it has." "A motion," said one of the 5 men, a stout man with a red beard whom Josephine did not know. "I move this board issue a formal statement that Miss Calloway is the aggrieved party in Friday's incident, and her position at this school is not in any manner under review." "Second," said a second man immediately. "Call the vote, Mr. Peterson." "All in favor." 5 hands went up. Mrs. Amelia Rourke's did not. "Motion carries. Miss Calloway, the board extends its profound regret and its apologies." "Thank you, Mr. Peterson." Yes. Well, this meeting is adjourned." The men stood. Chairs scraped back. Alden Rourke had not moved. He waited until Mrs. Eulalie Sims had gone out, and Tommy Arden and the 5 men of the board, and finally Mrs. Amelia Rourke herself, her face like a closed door. Then he crossed the schoolhouse floor to where Josephine was still seated in her chair, and he stopped a polite 3 feet away, and he took off his hat. "Miss Calloway." "Mr. Rourke." "My boy did a wrong thing." "Yes, sir, he did. He'll be sent to my brother's place in Nebraska for the summer. He won't set foot in this town till September." "Mr. Rourke, I do not." "I ain't asking for your forgiveness, ma'am. I'm telling you what's happening. My boy is a fool. He is my fool, and I will manage him." "Thank you, Mr. Rourke." "One more thing, ma'am." "Yes." Alden Rourke looked past her, looked at Vaughn, who was standing by the open door with his hat in his hands. "Vaughn, a word outside." "Say it in here, Alden." "All right, I'll say it in here." Alden turned back to Josephine, and his face was the same patient, unblinking face it had been when she first came in. "Ma'am, this man, Vaughn Daniels, brought 2 witnesses into a meeting today where none was expected. That is a thing I will remember. I ain't threatening him. I ain't threatening you. I am simply telling you that in this county, a man who is remembered by Alden Rourke is a man whose business I will keep an eye upon. His cattle, his water, his fences, his hands. You understand what I'm saying to you, ma'am?" "I understand you perfectly, Mr. Rourke." "Good day to you." "Good day, sir." He put his hat back on and walked out. Josephine sat very still in the chair. Vaughn did not speak for a full minute. "Miss Calloway." "Mr. Daniels." "I'm sorry you had to hear that." "Are you in danger, Mr. Daniels?" "No more than I was yesterday, ma'am." "That is not an answer." "No, ma'am, it ain't." She stood up. She walked to the doorway. She stopped, and she turned back, and she looked at him, and what she said next surprised her even as she was saying it. "Mr. Daniels?" "Ma'am?" "Will you come to supper at the boarding house on Wednesday evening?" He did not answer for a moment. "Ma'am." "That would be That would be public. Yes, it would. Folks would talk. Yes. And you would like them to. I would like them to understand, Mr. Daniels, that the man who walked me into this schoolhouse today is a man I intend to know better. I would like them to understand it plain. And I would like Alden Rourke, if word finds its way to him, to understand it plainest of all. Vaughn Daniels looked at her a long moment. Then very slowly, for the first time since she had met him, he smiled. Wednesday, he said. 6 o'clock. I'll be there, Miss Calloway. Thank you, Mr. Daniels. She walked out into the afternoon alone, because she wanted the town to see her walk out alone, and she went back to the boarding house with her chin exactly where the Lord had put it, and she climbed the narrow stairs to the narrow room, and she shut the narrow door. And she sat down on the edge of the bed, and she pressed both hands flat against her chest as though to hold something in, and she discovered that what she was holding in was not fear at all. It was something else. It was something she had not felt in 23 years on Beacon Hill, not once, not ever, and she did not yet have the word for it. But she knew the shape of it. It was the shape of a woman who had just chosen. Monday morning the schoolhouse bell rang at 8 o'clock, and Josephine Calloway stood at the open door and counted heads. 11 children, out of the 31 on her roll. But she did not let her face change. She stood in the doorway, and she smiled at each one as they came past her, and she said good morning, and she said the child's name when she knew it, and when she did not know it, she asked, and she said the name back to make certain she had it right. Clara Sims. Eulalie's daughter came in third. Good morning, Clara. Mornin', Miss Calloway. Mama said to tell you she is sorry for yesterday at church. She said she'd have stood up beside you if she'd had half the courage the Lord give a chicken. Please tell your mother I am very grateful to her. Yes, ma'am. Tommy Arden came in fifth. He did not meet her eyes because he was 15, and he had spoken in front of 7 men Saturday afternoon about a thing no 15-year-old boy knows how to speak about, and Josephine understood this, and she only nodded at him and said, Tommy, back row today. Would you be willing to help the little ones with their slates? Yes, ma'am, I can do that. Thank you, Tommy. Thank. The 11th child came in, and Josephine waited another 2 full minutes in the doorway, and no 12th child came. She closed the door. Good morning, class. Good morning, Miss Calloway. My name is Miss Josephine Calloway. I have come a long way to be your teacher, and I should like to begin this morning by saying something that I should like each one of you to carry home to your mother and father this evening. 11 small faces turned up to her. I am not ashamed. The smallest child, a girl of perhaps 6 with 2 yellow braids, put up her hand. Oh, yes, sweetheart. Miss Calloway. Yes. My mama said you was brave. Josephine had to look at the ceiling for 3 seconds before she could answer. Your mama is kind. She said brave, not kind. Then I shall endeavor, sweetheart, to be worthy of the word. She turned to the blackboard, and she picked up a stick of chalk, and her hand was steady. By Wednesday morning, the roll had climbed to 19. By Wednesday at noon, she had heard from 3 separate sources that Vaughn Daniels' east fence line had been cut in the night between Monday and Tuesday, that 40 head of his cattle had drifted onto open range, that 2 of his hands had quit without notice on Tuesday morning and ridden for Cheyenne, and that nobody in Laramie was quite willing to say out loud what everybody was quite certain of. She heard this last from Mrs. Dowd, who brought it to her at the dinner table in the form of a plate of cold chicken and a short sentence. Daniels is getting his tail kicked this week. Mrs. Dowd. You asked me to speak plain, girl. I am speaking plain. I did not ask you. You asked me with your face last Friday, and I have been speaking plain to you ever since. Eat the chicken. Is he as Mr. Daniels in? He is in the exact sort of trouble a man gets in when he crosses an Alden Rourke, And not one bit more, and not one bit less. He knew what it would cost him when he walked you into that schoolhouse Saturday. He has not once, to my knowledge, complained. Mrs. Dowd, I cannot let him. You cannot what, girl? You cannot let a grown man make his own choices. Listen to yourself. Josephine put down her fork. Is he still coming to supper tonight? Mrs. Dowd looked at her a long moment. Girl, a man who has lost 2 hands and 40 head of cattle in 48 hours and is presently riding his remaining fence line from dawn till dusk, and who has sent word to my kitchen at 11 o'clock this morning that he will be at this supper table at 6 o'clock sharp unless he is dead, is a man who is coming to supper tonight. He sent word. He sent his foreman, boy named Cal Hester, rode in on a lathered horse just to say Daniels would be here. Josephine looked at her hands. Mrs. Dowd? What? I do not know what I am doing. No, Mrs. Dowd said, and her voice was not unkind. I reckon you don't. Eat the chicken anyway. He came at 10 minutes of 6, and Mrs. Dowd had him seated at the long plank table in the place of honor at Josephine's right hand before the clock had finished striking. And the 3 other boarders, the drummer Harless, the feed clerk, and the thin mustachioed man whose name Josephine had learned was Mr. Dray, were already in their seats and watching with the open, hungry curiosity of men who knew they were about to witness something. Vaughn's right hand had a fresh wrap of linen across the knuckles. Josephine saw it, and she said nothing. Not then. She waited through Grace. She waited through the passing of the potatoes. She waited until Mr. Harless had launched into some story about a hotel in Denver and had everyone's attention at the far end of the table. Then she said very low, Your hand. Wire, Vaughn said. Fence wire. Nothin'. Your hand, Mr. Daniels. Miss Calloway, I been settin' fence since I was 12 years old. Wire caught my knuckles. It is truly nothin'. Where? Where what, ma'am? Where on the fence line? He looked at her. He set down his fork. Miss Calloway. Where? East line, the stretch that runs along the road to town. The stretch closest to the Rourke property. Yes, ma'am. How many cattle remain unaccounted for? 11. How many hands remain in your employ? 4, countin' me. Mr. Daniels. Ma'am, I am not going to cry at this table. No, ma'am, I would not expect you to. But I want you to know that I am not going to cry at this table because I am choosing not to. Yes, ma'am. Do you understand the difference? I understand it, Miss Calloway. What? She picked up her fork again. She took a small bite of potato she did not taste. At the far end of the table, Mr. Harless had reached the climactic point of his Denver hotel story and was laughing at his own joke, and the feed clerk was laughing politely, and the thin man Dray was watching Josephine and Vaughn over the rim of his coffee cup with the same fixed interest he had shown her on Friday night, and Josephine noticed this for the second time and filed it away somewhere under the place where she kept the letter from Henry Galt. Mr. Daniels. Ma'am. When supper is finished, I should like to speak with you on the porch. Mrs. Dowd will permit it. Yes, ma'am. I would like that. The knock on the front door came at 20 past 6. Mrs. Dowd, who had been carrying the coffee pot in from the kitchen, set the pot down on the sideboard. She wiped her hands on her apron. I was not expectin' a caller. No, ma'am, Mr. Harless said cheerfully. Neither was I. You hush. She went to the door. The 5 people at the table could hear every word of what followed because the hallway was 8 feet long and the walls were thin as a hymnal. Evenin', ma'am. Evenin', sir. I am lookin' for a Miss Josephine Calloway. I was told I might find her here. Josephine's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Vaughn saw it. His eyes came to her face. And who might be looking for her? My name is Raleigh Bishop, ma'am. I am an associate out of the Chicago office of the firm of Pinkerton and Sons. I am here on a matter of private family business, and I would be much obliged if I might have a quarter of an hour of the young lady's time." Josephine set her fork down on the plate without a sound. "Mr. Bishop," Mrs. Dowd said, and her voice was pleasant as cold iron. "Miss Calloway is presently at her supper. If you would care to return tomorrow morning at a Christian hour." "Ma'am, with respect, I have ridden 4 days from Cheyenne. I will sit on your porch until tomorrow morning if I must, but I would prefer to speak with the young lady this evening." There was a pause. "Wait on the porch, Mr. Bishop." "Yes, ma'am, I thank you." The door closed. Mrs. Dowd came back into the dining room, and she looked at Josephine, and her face said nothing because her face did not need to. "Child." "Yes, Mrs. Dowd." "You know this man." "I do not know him. I know who sent him." "I see." "Mrs. Dowd, may I?" "Go up to your room, girl. I will tell him you are indisposed." "No." Everyone at the table looked at her. "I will not go up to my room." "Miss Calloway," Vaughn said low. "Mr. Daniels, I have spent 23 years going up to my room when men have come to the door with business that concerned me. I will not do it again. Not in this house. Not ever." "Yes, ma'am." "I am going out to the porch. I would be grateful, Mr. Daniels, if you would come with me." "Yes, ma'am. I will." Mrs. Dowd. "Girl, I would be grateful if you would remain in the front hallway within earshot." "I was planning on it." Raleigh Bishop was a man of about 45, tidy with a neat gray suit and a neat gray mustache, and a neat leather folio under his left arm. He was seated on the porch rail when Josephine came out, and he stood up the moment the door opened, and he removed his hat with the unhurried correctness of a man who has been paid to be polite under all conceivable circumstances. "Miss Calloway." "Mr. Bishop." "Ma'am, I do not know this gentleman. This is Mr. Vaughn Daniels. He is a friend. He will remain for this conversation. Ma'am, the business I have come upon is of a strictly family nature, and Mr. Daniels will remain for this conversation." A beat. "Yes, ma'am. Please state your business." "Miss Calloway, your father, Mr. Cornelius Calloway of Boston, has engaged my firm to locate your whereabouts and to convey to you in person a communication from himself. I have here a sealed letter, which I have been instructed to place into your hand and to remain with you while you read it, and to convey your answer back by wire from the telegraph office in Cheyenne." "I see." "The letter, ma'am." He held it out. She did not take it. "Mr. Bishop." "Ma'am, my father engaged a firm to find me." "Yes, ma'am?" "Because I left his house without his permission." "I am not privy to the particulars, ma'am." "Yes, you are." Raleigh Bishop blinked once. "I beg your pardon, ma'am." "You have ridden 4 days from Cheyenne with a sealed letter in a folio. You are a professional man. You read the letter before you sealed it, or your office did, or one of your associates did. Do not stand on my porch and tell me you are not privy to the particulars." A very small, very dry smile touched the corner of Raleigh Bishop's mouth. "Miss Calloway." "Yes." "You are not what I had been led to expect." "I am quite certain I am not. The letter, Mr. Bishop." He handed her the letter. She broke the seal without ceremony. She read it standing up on the porch in the last of the summer evening light, and Vaughn Daniels stood a half step behind her left shoulder, and Raleigh Bishop stood 6 feet away with his hat in his hand, and Mrs. Dowd through the cracked door of the front hallway stood with her arms folded across her chest like a woman at a gate. Josephine read the letter twice. Then she folded it. She folded it again. She held it in her gloved hand against the front of her dress. "Mr. Bishop?" "Ma'am?" My father writes that he is prepared to forgive my conduct of the past 4 months and restore me to my position in his household on condition that I return by the first eastbound train and marry Mr. Edwin Crowell on or before the 15th day of September of this year. Yes, ma'am. He writes further that if I do not, he will come himself. Yes, ma'am. He writes further that Mr. Edwin Crowell is at present aboard a train bound for Cheyenne and will arrive there on or about Saturday next. Vaughn Daniels, behind her shoulder, did not move. Yes, ma'am. My answer, Mr. Bishop, is no. Ma'am, if I may, your father is a gentleman of some considerable standing, and my answer is no. Ma'am, perhaps a night to reflect. Mr. Bishop. Yes. My answer will be no tonight. My answer will be no tomorrow morning. My answer will be no when Mr. Crowell steps off the train in Cheyenne, and my answer will be no when my father steps off the train in Laramie. Do you understand? Yes, Miss Calloway, I understand. Convey it. I will, ma'am. Good evening, Mr. Bishop. Good evening, Miss Calloway, Mr. Daniels. Mr. Bishop. He tipped his hat. He walked down the porch steps to his horse. He mounted, and he rode, and he was gone into the dark before Josephine had let out the breath she had been holding. She stood very still at the porch rail. Vaughn stood beside her. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. From inside the house, Mrs. Dowd's voice dry. I will be in the kitchen. You got until the coffee's cold. The door shut. Josephine began to laugh. It was not laughter exactly. It was the noise a person makes when there is no room left inside them for another feeling, and one has to come out as sound. Miss Calloway. Mr. Daniels. Sit down, ma'am, please. She sat down on the porch step. He sat down 3 feet away, not closer, and he took off his hat, and he set it on the boards between them. You want to tell me, he said, or you want me not to ask? I want to tell you. All right. My father promised me to Edwin Crowell when I was 19 years old. Mr. Crowell is 43 years of age. He has buried 2 wives. The first died of a fever. The second, she stopped. The second, ma'am. The second died of a fall down the back stairs of the house on Mount Vernon Street. Mr. Daniels. She was 26. The house is 3 stories, and the back stairs are narrow, and the fall broke her neck. The inquest found it a misadventure. The servants did not all find it a misadventure. One of them, the Irish cook, came to me at the church the following Sunday and put a hand upon my arm and said only, Miss Josephine, do not marry that man. Do not marry him. That is all she said to me. She was dismissed from her position the following Tuesday, and I never saw her again. Vaughn did not say anything for a long moment. Miss Calloway. Yes. Your father knew. My father knew. My father knew, and my father pressed the suit anyway. Because Mr. Crowell's family holds paper on my father's bank, Mr. Daniels. Because my father's bank is not a well bank. Because a marriage was the cheapest cure my father could find, and I was the cheapest medicine in his cabinet. Jesus, ma'am. I apologize for the bluntness. Don't apologize to me. Don't you ever apologize to me for telling the truth of a thing. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her gloved wrist. Mr. Daniels. Ma'am, if my father comes to Laramie, and I believe he will bring Edwin Crowell with him. He will bring a minister with him. He will bring money with him. He will go first to the school board, and he will offer Mr. Peterson a sum of money to declare me morally unfit for my position. Failing that, he will go to the sheriff, and he will represent me as a runaway and an ungrateful daughter. Failing that, he will take you out of this town on an eastbound train, whether you care to go or not. Yes? He will try. He will succeed, Mr. Daniels, unless I have a reason to remain that the law of this territory will recognize. And what reason would the law recognize, Miss Calloway? She looked at him. She did not say the word. She did not have to say the word. Vaughn Daniels held her eyes for a long, long second. His hand, the one with the fresh linen across the knuckles, tightened around the brim of his hat where it lay on the boards between them. "Ma'am?" "Mr. Daniels, I am not asking." "I know it. I am only telling you the shape of what is coming." "I know it, Miss Calloway. I have known you for 6 days." "Yes, ma'am. 6 days, Mr. Daniels. I know the number, ma'am. And I sit on this porch, and I tell you the worst of my family's business and the worst of my past. And I do not tell you these things because I am making a proposition of any kind. I tell you because I believe you are owed the truth of what Alden Rourke will be able to purchase from my father, and what my father will be able to purchase from Alden Rourke, if the two of them ever sit down in the same room." Vaughn was very still. "Ma'am?" "Yes. Your father and Alden Rourke will find each other, Mr. Daniels. Men like that always find each other." "Yes, ma'am. I reckon they do." Somewhere off toward the main street, a dog began to bark. A second dog answered. Then silence. "May." Vaughn picked up his hat. He did not put it on. He turned it over in his hands twice, and then he did a thing he had not done before. He set the hat back down on the boards between them, and he reached across, and very carefully, very gently, he laid his bandaged hand on top of her gloved one, where it rested on her knee. He did not hold. He only laid. "Miss Calloway." "Yes." "I do not know what is comin'." "No. But I know what ain't comin'." "What is not comin', Mr. Daniels? You ain't goin' back east on any train, ma'am. Not while I am breathin' air in this county. And I would be obliged if you would not speak again about what Alden Rourke can purchase from your father, because there is a thing that man cannot purchase from anyone, and that thing is the word of Vaughn Daniels when it has been given." She looked down at the bandaged hand upon her glove. "Mr. Daniels?" "Ma'am?" "Has the word been given?" And he did not answer right away. Then he said very quiet, "The word has been given, Miss Calloway, 6 days ago, on Main Street, when I walked you home." Josephine Calloway closed her eyes, and for the first time since she had stepped off a train in Laramie, Wyoming, she let a tear fall without wiping it away. From somewhere down the road out past the edge of town, the sound of a horse at a hard gallop. Coming in. Coming fast. Vaughn's head came up. He was on his feet before she knew he had moved. "Miss Calloway, inside." "Mr. Daniels." "Inside, ma'am. Now, please." And the hooves came on louder, and they did not slow at the edge of the boarding house yard, and they did not slow at the gate, and Josephine was halfway to the front door when the rider pulled up hard in the road, not 20 feet from the porch, and his horse reared once, and he swung down, and he took the porch steps 2 at a time, with his hat in his hand and his face gone the color of ash. It was Cal Hester, Vaughn's foreman. "Mr. Daniels?" "Cal, what? Boss?" Cal was gasping. He had ridden his horse into a lather and a half. "Boss, it's the house, the main house. Somebody's put a torch to the back of it. The boys got it out before it took, but Mr. Daniels, it weren't no accident, sir. There was coal oil on the porch posts." Vaughn Daniels stood very still on the porch boards. He did not swear. He did not shout. He did not move at all for perhaps 3 seconds. Then he turned slow, and he looked at Josephine where she stood in the doorway. And he said in a voice she had not yet heard him use, "Miss Calloway, go inside. Lock the door. Do not open it for any man between now and sunrise except Mrs. Dowd. Do you hear me? Mr. Daniels, do you hear me?" "I hear you." "Good." He went down the porch steps. He did not put his hat on. He swung up behind Cal Hester onto the lathered horse, and the horse went around in the yard once, and he was gone down the Laramie road at a gallop that did not slow, and Josephine Calloway stood in the doorway of the Dowd boarding house, with both her gloved hands pressed against her mouth. Behind her, Mrs. Dowd's voice, quiet and terrible. "Lock the door, child." Josephine locked the door. She did not sleep. She sat up in the narrow chair by the narrow window, with her shawl wrapped round her shoulders, and her father's letter folded 4 times in her lap, and she watched the road. Mrs. Dowd had bolted the kitchen door and the front door, and the door that led to the root cellar, and Mrs. Dowd was sitting in the front hallway in a rocking chair she had dragged out of her own bedroom with a single-shot pistol across her knees that had belonged to her late husband, and Mrs. Dowd was not asleep either. Around 3 o'clock, Josephine came down the stairs in her stocking feet. "Child." "Mrs. Dowd, I cannot sit up there any longer." "Then sit down here." She sat down on the second stair. "Mrs. Dowd." "What?" "Mr. Dray." "What about him?" "His door was open a hand's width when I came past it just now. His bed has not been slept in." The old woman's face did not change, but her 2 hands closed slowly on the pistol. "When did you last hear him come in?" "I did not hear him come in this evening at all." "Girl." "Yes." "That man has been watching you." "I know. I have known it for a week. I did not say anything because I have had men like Dray under my roof before, and they are usually drummers of a low kind and nothing worse. But I did not like his face from the first night." "Mrs. Dowd, who is he?" "I do not know, child, but I intend to find out when the sun comes up." She did not have to wait for the sun. At 5:15, there were hooves in the road. Josephine was at the window in 3 steps. "Mrs. Dowd, it is Cal Hester. Open the door." She unbolted the door, and Cal Hester came up the porch steps with his hat in his hand, and his face, which had been ashen the night before, was now a different gray, the gray of a man who has been up all night drinking coffee and not speaking. "Miss Calloway, ma'am." "Is he alive?" "Yes, ma'am. He is alive. He is tired. He is ornery. He has a burn on his left forearm the size of a silver dollar, and he will not sit down to have it dressed. He sent me to tell you the house is standin'. The barn is standin'. No stock was lost. 2 of the boys caught sight of a rider going east across the meadow about the time the oil went up, and they gave chase, but they lost him in the draw." "Cal." "Ma'am?" "Did the rider carry anything?" "Ma'am, a saddlebag, a valise, anything at all." "Ma'am, the boys said he rode light, only a coat and a carbine." "Was he thin, tall, drooping mustache?" Cal Hester stared at her. "Ma'am, that is a pretty fair description of what they said." Mrs. Dowd made a small sound in her throat like a woman who has swallowed something bitter and intends to spit. "Cal Hester." "Ma'am, you tell Vaughn Daniels that the man who put coal oil on his porch posts has been eaten at my supper table for 9 days under the name of Mr. Dray. You tell him Dray cleared out sometime between 6 o'clock last evening and 2 o'clock this morning, and his room is empty and his valise is gone. And I have never in my life laid eyes on a traveling man who left no forwarding address except one who was not a traveling man at all. You tell him that." "Yes, ma'am." "Cal, Miss Calloway, tell Mr. Daniels I am coming out to the Rocking D this morning." "Ma'am, he said very particular that you were not to." "I heard what he said. Tell him I am coming anyway. I will hire a buggy at the livery at 7. "Ma'am, the road ain't—" "Mr. Hester, has Mr. Daniels ever told you in the course of your acquaintance about his sister?" Cal Hester's face changed. "Yes, ma'am, once." Hester's. "Then you know, Mr. Hester, that he is a man who has spent 9 years regretting that he was not where a woman needed him to be. I will not be the second woman in his life to sit safe behind a bolted door while he rides alone." Cal Hester looked at her for a long moment. Then he put his hat back on, and he said, 7 o'clock, ma'am. I'll meet you at the livery. I will drive the buggy myself." "Thank you, Mr. Hester." "Ma'am?" He went. At 7 o'clock, she was at the livery in her plainest dress and her sturdiest boots and a straw bonnet she had not worn since Boston. Cal Hester had a two-seat buggy and a pair of stout bays, and he handed her up without a word, and they were out of Laramie in a quarter of an hour. They did not speak for the first 3 miles. Then Cal said, "Ma'am." "Yes, Mr. Hester." "I've been with Mr. Daniels 6 years." "Yes." "He has never once brought a woman out to the Rocking D." "I am aware, Mr. Hester. I only mention it. Thank you." "Yes, ma'am." Vaughn was at the corral when the buggy pulled in. He saw her and his whole body went still, the way a man's body goes still when something has just cost him more than he had budgeted. He handed the lead rope he was holding to one of the hands, and he crossed the yard with his left arm held a little away from his side, and he did not smile. "Miss Calloway." "Mr. Daniels, I asked you to stay in town." "I know you did." "Why are you here?" "Because the man who put coal oil on your porch posts has been sleeping under the same roof as me for the past 9 days. Mr. Daniels and Mrs. Dowd and I believe he was placed there to watch me and to watch any man who came near me. And we believe further that the fire last night was meant to take you out of this town for a day and a night so that something else could happen in it." Vaughn did not speak for a moment. "Cal." "Boss." "She's right. She told me on the porch this morning." "How long ago did Dre leave the Dowd place?" "Mrs. Dowd reckons between 6 and 2, boss." "That's 12 hours of head start. If he was riding east and meaning to meet someone off the Cheyenne train, he would have met it by now." Vaughn turned his head very slowly. "Miss Calloway." "Yes." "Your man Crowell was not due in Cheyenne until Saturday, according to my father's letter." "According to your father's letter." "Mr. Daniels, my father is not a man who tells the truth when a lie will do the work faster." "Yes, ma'am. I'm beginning to understand that." "Boss." "What, Cal?" "Rider coming up the Laramie Road, hard." Vaughn's head came around. "It's the sheriff, boss." "Is it now?" Sheriff Porter Kyle was 63 years old, and he had been sheriff of Laramie County for 11 of those years, and he was a reasonable man, in the sense that he was reasonable with whoever had paid him last. He rode into the Rocking D yard at a trot, and he did not dismount. He touched the brim of his hat. "Vaughn." "Sheriff?" "Miss Calloway." "Sheriff Kyle?" "I am here on an unpleasant errand, folks." "You generally are Porter. Say it." "Bent." "Vaughn, there is a warrant been sworn out against you this morning in town, for assault and battery. The complainant is a Mr. Silas Rourke. He says you come upon him on the Laramie Road yesterday afternoon, and you beat him about the head and shoulders with a wagon, spoke in the presence of no witnesses, and—" Porter. "Yes, Vaughn." "Silas Rourke is in Nebraska. Silas Rourke is presently at his father's house, Vaughn, with a bandage around his head, and a very particular recollection of your face." "He is not in Nebraska." "He is not, Vaughn? No." Vaughn Daniels took his hat off and ran his bandaged hand through his hair. "Porter, you been paid." "Vaughn." "Have you been paid?" "Vaughn, I am required by the dignity of my office to—" "How much did Alden give you, Porter?" A long silence. "Vaughn, do not make this harder than it is." "How much?" "Enough that I will sleep a little softer this winter. That is all I will say." Porter. "Yes." "You're a sorry old man." "I know it, Vaughn." "What are your orders?" "I am to take you in. I am to hold you over the weekend until the circuit judge comes through on Monday. Bond is set at $1,000, which no man in this county is like to post for you given the present state of your affairs." Josephine stepped forward. "Sheriff." "Ma'am, this ain't—" "Sheriff Kyle, I will post the bond." Everybody looked at her. "Ma'am, with respect, $1,000 is a—" I have $184 in gold coin in a purse in my trunk at Mrs. Dowd's. I have written to my mother's cousin, Mr. Henry Galt of Boston, attorney at law, for a wire transfer in the sum of $1,000, and Mr. Galt will not refuse me. The wire will come through at the Laramie office by Monday morning at the latest. I will sign whatever bond you require, and Mr. Daniels will be released upon my signature. Ma'am, the law requires the bond be posted in full. Then Mr. Daniels will spend the weekend in your jail, Sheriff, and on Monday morning when the wire comes through, he will walk out of it. And on Tuesday morning, I will walk into the office of Mr. Albert Kinney, Territorial Marshal in Cheyenne, who was a schoolmate of my late uncle's, and who will be very interested. Sheriff Kyle, in the question of why a sworn officer of Laramie County arrested a rancher on the word of a complainant who was supposed to be in Nebraska, and a witness list consisting of precisely no one. Do you understand me, Sheriff? Sheriff Porter Kyle looked at her for what felt like a very long time. Ma'am. Yes, Sheriff. You would have made a hell of a lawyer. Thank you, Sheriff. Take him. Miss Calloway. Take him, Mr. Daniels. Walk in on your own feet. I will be at the jail by sundown with a hot meal. Vaughn Daniels looked at her. Ma'am? Yes. Yes, ma'am. He went. She rode back to Laramie in the buggy with Cal Hester, and she did not cry, not once, though her hands shook in her lap for the whole of the first mile. At the edge of town she turned to Cal, and she said, Mr. Hester? Ma'am? Drive me to the telegraph office first, then to Mrs. Dowd's. Yes, ma'am. The telegraph clerk took her 2 wires without comment. The first was to Henry Galt in Boston requesting the $1,000. The second was to Albert Kinney, Territorial Marshal, Cheyenne, Wyoming Territory, and it read as follows. Now, Sir, a matter of urgency has arisen in Laramie requiring the attention of a disinterested officer. I am the daughter of the late Mary Galt Calloway, who was second cousin to your mother, and I write upon that acquaintance. Respectfully, J. Calloway, Schoolmistress, Laramie. She paid for both wires in coin from the little purse in her reticule. She was walking out of the telegraph office when she heard the whistle of the noon train at the Laramie Depot, 2 blocks east. She did not think. She turned and she walked toward the sound. Cal Hester called after her. She did not stop. She walked the 2 blocks and she came round the corner of the station building, and she saw them. 2 men standing on the platform, with a porter and 3 trunks. The taller of the 2 men was perhaps 45, and he was turning his head to look at the town with the open assessing distaste of a man pricing a shabby coat. He had bad teeth. He had very bad teeth. The shorter of the 2 men was 61 years old, and he was her father. Josephine Calloway stopped on the boardwalk 30 feet away. Cornelius Calloway saw her. Josephine. She did not speak. Josephine, come here. She did not speak. Daughter, do not embarrass me further. Come here at once. She took 1 step forward, not because he had told her to, but because she had decided to. Father, you have led me a merry chase, child. Why are you here? I have come to take you home. No, I beg your pardon. I said no, father. Edwin Crowell, standing just behind her father's shoulder, smiled. He should not have smiled. The smile was the thing that did it. Josephine looked at Edwin Crowell's teeth, and she thought of the Irish cook on the church steps on Mount Vernon Street, and she thought of a woman dead at the bottom of a back staircase, and something very small, and very hard, and very clean, turned over inside her chest. Father, daughter. I will say this once. I will not repeat it. I will not marry Mr. Crowell. I will not return to Boston. I will not come to the hotel with you. I will not dine with you this evening. I will not speak to you privately in any room in this town. If you wish to speak to me again, you will do so at the office of Mr. Albert Kinney, Territorial Marshal in Cheyenne, in the presence of that officer, in the presence of counsel of my choosing. Do you understand me? Josephine, You are making a spectacle of this family in the public street. Father, I have been making a spectacle of myself in one public street or another since the afternoon I stepped off a train in this town. I find I have a considerable gift for it. Daughter. Good afternoon, Father. She turned and she walked back the way she had come. She was 8 steps gone when Edwin Crowell's voice called after her. Miss Calloway. She stopped. She did not turn. Miss Calloway, I have come a very long way to claim what was promised to me. She turned then. She walked back to him. She walked right up close to him until she could smell the bay rum on his throat and see the small brown spots on the backs of his hands. And she stopped with her face perhaps 12 inches from his face. And she said quiet enough that only he and her father could hear. Mr. Crowell. Yes, Miss Calloway. Mary Halloran. Edwin Crowell's face changed. I beg your pardon. Mary Halloran, your cook, the Irish girl, the one who was dismissed on the Tuesday after the funeral. I found her, Mr. Crowell. I found her in the spring of this year in a boarding house in South Boston. I sat in her kitchen and I drank her tea. And she told me, Mr. Crowell, what the police were not told, and what the inquest was not told, and what your late wife's own mother was not told. And I have written it down. And I have given it in a sealed envelope into the hands of 3 separate persons, one of whom is Mr. Henry Galt, and 2 of whom you do not know and will never know. And the instruction upon the envelope, Mr. Crowell, is that it is to be opened, and its contents sworn out as an affidavit in the event of my death, my disappearance, or my marriage, to any man, including you. Edwin Crowell did not speak. Do you understand me, Mr. Crowell? Miss Calloway. Do you understand me? Yes. Then I suggest, sir, that you get back on the train. I suggest it very strongly. She left him standing there. Her father caught her arm at the edge of the platform. She looked down at his hand on her arm. Father, take your hand off me. Josephine, take it off. He took it off. Josephine, the bank. Do you understand what will happen to the bank? Yes, Father, I do understand. I understood at 19. I have been understanding ever since. Then you will... I will not. I will not trade my life for your bank. You should not have expected me to. You should have been ashamed to expect me to. Good afternoon, Father. She walked off the platform. Cal Hester was standing at the corner of the station building with his mouth slightly open. Ma'am, Mr. Hester. Ma'am, was that your... Yes, Mr. Hester, it was. Drive me to the jail, please. I owe Mr. Daniels a hot meal. She saw him through the bars. The little Laramie jail had 2 cells, and the far one was empty, and Vaughn was in the near one sitting on the edge of the cot with his bandaged hand wrapped around a tin cup. The cell door was locked. Sheriff Kyle had, to his credit, left them alone and had taken his afternoon coffee across the street at the hotel. She set the basket down on the floor outside the bars. Mr. Daniels. Ma'am. My father is in town. Vaughn set the tin cup down slow. When? Noon train. He and Mr. Crowell both. Jesus. I have spoken with them. You have. Mr. Crowell will be on the evening train east. My father will not be, I think, but he will not be at supper at the boarding house either. He will be at the hotel. Composing, I expect, a telegram to someone. Miss Calloway, you went down to that depot by yourself. I did. You did not wait for me. Mr. Daniels, you were in a cell. I would have got out. I know, that is precisely what I did not wish to wait for. He looked at her through the bars. Miss Calloway. Yes. Come closer. She came closer. She sat down on the little 3-legged stool the sheriff kept for visitors, and she drew it up to the bars, and she folded her gloved hands in her lap. Miss Calloway, Mr. Daniels, I have been sittin' in this cell for 5 hours. Yes, a man in a cell has a considerable amount of time to think. I imagine so. I have been thinking, Miss Calloway, that I do not intend to spend another 6 days knowing you before I say what I mean to say. She did not move. Mr. Daniels. Ma'am, hush a minute and let me say it. All right. Miss Josephine Calloway, I am a widower. The bars went very quiet between them. Mr. Daniels? Daddy. My wife's name was Ellen. She was 22 years old. She died the second winter we was on the Rocking D. She died in childbed, ma'am, and the child with her, a little girl we had meant to call Ruth. That was 6 years ago, and I have not spoken her name aloud to another soul since the day I buried her. Cal Hester told you I have never brought a woman out to the Rocking D, and Cal told you true. I have not brought a woman past the gate of my own heart in 6 years. Miss Calloway and I had made my peace with the notion that I never would. And then a drunk boy put his mouth on a stranger in broad daylight on Main Street, and I looked at her, and I knew, ma'am. I knew inside of 30 seconds. I knew before I knew your Christian name. Mr. Daniels! I ain't finished. All right. I do not have much to offer you. I have a ranch that Alden Rourke is picking apart a fence post at a time. I have a burned porch and 11 head of cattle gone missing and a jail cell I am presently occupying. I have a hand that is not going to heal quite right and a sister in Ohio who will not write me back, and a name that in this county, at this particular hour, is a name that costs a woman something to be seen with. I know what I am, but I am asking you, Miss Calloway, and I am asking you through the bars of Porter Kyle's jail because I do not trust myself to ask you anywhere softer. Will you marry me? She did not answer at once. She reached through the bars. She put her 2 gloved hands around his one bandaged one. Mr. Daniels? Ma'am? You have not kissed me. No, ma'am, I have not. A stranger took my first kiss in front of the whole town 11 days ago. I know it, ma'am. Would you take my second? Vaughn Daniels leaned forward through the bars, and he put his forehead against hers, and he closed his eyes, and he did not kiss her, not yet. Miss Calloway. Yes. Not in a jail. No. On my porch, when I am out of here, with the sun coming up behind you and nobody watching. That is when I will kiss you. Yes, Mr. Daniels. Yes, to which part, ma'am? Yes, to all of it. She held his hand through the bars a long while. When she walked out of the jail into the late afternoon, she did not see the figure standing in the shadow of the alley across the street. She did not see him put his hand inside his coat. She did not see his face. But Cal Hester, waiting by the buggy, saw him. Cal Hester saw him very clearly. Cal Hester saw that the man in the alley was not the thin drummer named Dre. Cal Hester saw that the man in the alley was Silas Rourke, and that what he had inside his coat was a revolver, and that his bandaged head was turned in the direction of Miss Josephine Calloway's back. Cal Hester dropped the reins, and he ran. Cal Hester yelled her name. Josephine turned her head half a second before the shot went off. The half second saved her life. The bullet went past her shoulder and took a splinter the size of a man's thumb out of the doorpost of the jail behind her, and Cal Hester was already across the road. By then already moving, and he hit Silas Rourke in the chest with the full weight of a grown man running at a dead sprint, and the two of them went down together into the dirt of the alley in a tangle of arms and knees and a second shot that went straight up into the sky. Josephine did not move. She could not move. Her 2 feet had gone into the boards of the boardwalk as though somebody had nailed them there. Inside the jail, Vaughn Daniels was already on his feet, with his hand wrapped around the bars, and he was shouting her name, and Sheriff Porter Kyle, who had just stepped out of the hotel across the street with a fresh cup of coffee in his hand, dropped the coffee and ran. Nazi. Cal Hester was the larger man. Cal Hester was also the angrier man. By the time Porter Kyle reached the alley, Cal had Silas Rourke, face down in the dirt, with one knee in the middle of his back, and the revolver kicked 6 feet away under a water trough, and Cal was breathing like a bellows, and saying over and over in a low, flat voice that was not quite speech, "You pointed it at her. You pointed it at her. You pointed it at her." Cal Hester. Sheriff. Off him, son. He pointed it at her, Sheriff. I know it, Cal. I saw the second shot from the door of the hotel. Off him, son. You done your part. I got him. Cal Hester did not get up for a long moment. Then he got up. Sheriff Kyle turned Silas Rourke over with the toe of his boot. Silas was bleeding from the nose, and his eyes were open, and he was not at that particular moment a man with anything to say. Son. Sheriff, you just tried to kill a schoolteacher in the public street of my town. Sheriff, shut your mouth, boy. Shut it right now. You are going into the cell next to the man you swore a false warrant against this morning. And I am going to sit at my desk, and I am going to write out a very different document, and then I am going to ride out to the Rocking D my own self, and I am going to have a conversation with your father that I should have had 11 years ago. Get up. Silas Rourke got up. Sheriff Kyle walked him across the road by the scruff of the neck, like a man walks a dog, and Josephine Calloway still had not moved from the boardwalk, and she still had not moved when Vaughn Daniels came out of the jail with the cell door left open behind him, and the sheriff's keys hanging in the lock, because the sheriff had somewhere between the alley and the boardwalk changed his mind about a number of things. Miss Calloway. She looked at him. Miss Calloway, are you hit? No. You sure? I am sure. Her voice came out very small. Come here, ma'am. She came. She walked the 4 steps between them, and she walked straight into him, and Vaughn Daniels put his arms around Josephine Calloway for the first time in their acquaintance, and he held her in the public street of Laramie, Wyoming, and he did not care one single solitary thing about who was watching. And people were watching. The whole length of Main Street was watching. Eulalie Sims at the door of the dry goods store was watching. Mr. Peterson at the window of the schoolhouse was watching. Mrs. Dowd, who had come down the road the moment she heard the first shot with her late husband's pistol in her apron pocket, was watching from the corner of Pine Street, and her face, which was not a face built for crying, was wet. Josephine put her forehead against Vaughn's chest, and she finally let it out. Not a wail, not a sob. Just a long, shuddering breath that had been inside her, she realized, since Beacon Hill. Mr. Daniels? Ma'am. I am going to cry now. Yes, ma'am. In the street. Yes, ma'am. Cry. She cried. When she was finished, Vaughn held her at arm's length, and he looked down at her, and his own eyes were not entirely dry, and he said, Miss Calloway. Yes, I am taking you home. To Mrs. Dowd's. No, ma'am. To the Rocking D. Mr. Daniels. Ma'am, your father is in this town. Dre is unaccounted for, and the boy who just pointed a gun at you has a father who has not yet heard the news. I am not leaving you in that boarding house tonight. Mrs. Dowd can ride out with us for propriety. She can stay as long as you need her to stay. But you are not sleeping alone within walking distance of those 3 men tonight or any night until this is finished. She did not argue. Mrs. Dowd did not argue either, and that was the thing that surprised Josephine most of all. The old woman came up the boardwalk, and she looked at Vaughn, and she looked at Josephine, and she said only, I will pack a bag. 20 minutes. Cal Hester, you go fetch the buggy. Yes, ma'am. They were out of Laramie by 5:30. They passed the hotel on the way out. Cornelius Calloway was standing at the upstairs window with the curtain pulled back, and Josephine saw him, and she did not look away, and she did not look down, and she did not hurry. She held her father's eyes from the seat of the buggy for the full length of the hotel's frontage, and her father's face behind the glass was the face of a man who had understood something he had been refusing for a long time to understand. He let the curtain fall. Josephine turned her face forward. Mr. Daniels? Ma'am? He will leave on the morning train. Yes, ma'am, I reckon he will. He will not come back. No, ma'am. He will not come back because he is a small man, Mr. Daniels, and small men do not follow a quarrel into a country where they have no power. No, ma'am, they do not. I feel sorry for him, For the first time in my life, I feel sorry for him. That is a generous thing to feel, ma'am. I do not know that it is generosity. I think it may only be that I have finally put him down. Vaughn Daniels, holding the reins with his good hand, did not answer that. He only looked at her for a long moment, and then he looked back at the road, and he clucked once to the bays. Sheriff Porter Kyle rode out to the Rocking D at 9 o'clock that night with a lantern and a face that had aged 5 years since noon. He sat on the porch with Vaughn and Josephine and Mrs. Dowd and a pot of coffee, and he took off his hat and he laid it on his knee and he said, "I have had a long conversation with Alden Rourke this evening." Porter. Vaughn. Tell it. Alden did not know. About the pistol. About the alley. Alden thought he was dealing with a boy who had been made a fool of in public, and he was willing to pay the cost of cutting some fence and singeing a porch to teach a grown man to mind his own business. He was not willing to pay the cost of attempted murder of a schoolteacher in broad daylight. And he made that plain to me tonight, Vaughn, in language I will not repeat in front of these ladies. He did not authorize the shot. He did not. What about Dre? Dre was not Alden's man, Vaughn. Alden never heard the name. Josephine set her coffee cup down. Sheriff Kyle? Miss Calloway. Then whose man was he? Porter Kyle reached inside his vest and he drew out a folded telegram. This come into my office about an hour before I rode out. It is a reply from the marshal's office in Cheyenne to a wire you sent this morning, Miss Calloway. Marshal Kinney sends his respects and he says he will be in Laramie on Monday's train, and he says further. Kyle unfolded the wire. That the description of the man calling himself Dre matches in every particular a private operative formerly in the employ of one Mr. Edwin Crowell of Boston, Massachusetts, who parted with that employment in the spring of this year and has since been engaged in occasional independent work of an irregular nature. The porch went very quiet. Edwin Crowell. Yes, ma'am. My Edwin Crowell. Your Edwin Crowell, who I am given to understand was on the noon train today. Who is by now on the evening train east, Sheriff? Yes, ma'am, he is. Marshal Kinney has wired ahead. Mr. Crowell will be met at the Cheyenne station. He will not be going home to Boston this week. He may not, in fact, be going home for some considerable time. Josephine closed her eyes. Mary Halloran. Beg pardon, ma'am. Nothing, Sheriff. Please go on. Not much more to go on with, ma'am. Dre ain't yet been located. I expect he is halfway to Colorado and will not be coming back. Silas Rourke is in my cell and will remain there until the circuit judge comes through Monday, and I can tell you with some confidence, ma'am, that Alden is not posting the boy's bond. Alden told me this evening, and I will not forget the way he said it, that he has spoiled his son for 26 years, and tonight is the night he stops paying for the privilege. Sheriff? Ma'am? Thank you. Miss Calloway? Yes. I am the kind of sheriff I am. I will not pretend to be otherwise. I took Alden's money this morning and I will have to live with that. But I did not take it for murder. And when I ride out of this yard tonight, I want you to know that the warrant against Vaughn Daniels has been torn up in my office stove, and the charge against the boy in my cell is attempted murder, and I will testify to it myself on Monday morning in open court. That is the best I can give you, ma'am. It ain't much, but it is all of it. It is enough, Sheriff. Thank you, ma'am. He put his hat back on. He stood up. Vaughn. Porter. You marry this one. I intend to Porter. Don't waste time on it. No, sir, I do not intend to. Porter Kyle rode away into the dark. Mrs. Dowd stood up from her chair and she said, I am going inside. I am going to find the whiskey Vaughn Daniels keeps in his cabinet that he thinks no one knows about. I am going to pour 3 glasses of it. I will bring 2 of them out to this porch. The third is for me. I have earned it. And she went inside. Vaughn and Josephine were alone. He did not say anything for a long while. Neither did she. Finally she said, Mr. Daniels. Ma'am, earlier today, in the jail, you asked me a question. I remember the question, ma'am. I gave you an answer. I remember the answer. I should like to give it to you again, out of the jail, on a porch, before the sun comes up as you said, though I do not believe I can wait until sunrise. Miss Calloway. Yes. Ask me to kiss you. She turned in her chair. She put her hand without the glove now flat against his cheek. Mr. Daniels, will you kiss me? He did. It was not the kiss of a man in a hurry, and it was not the kiss of a man making a claim. It was the kiss of a man who had waited 6 years and had decided he was done waiting, and of a woman who had waited 23 years and had decided the same. When he drew back, she kept her hand against his cheek. Mr. Daniels. Ma'am. That was the first one. Yes, ma'am, it was. The other don't count. No, it does not. It never did. No. Mrs. Dowd came out with the 3 glasses of whiskey, and she looked at their faces, and she said, I see I ought to have given you 15 more minutes. And she set the glasses down on the rail anyway, and she sat down in her chair, and the 3 of them drank together in the quiet. They were married on the 29th of August in the schoolhouse yard, because the church of the Reverend Obadiah Hale was not a building Josephine Calloway was willing to stand inside of for any ceremony whatsoever, and the Reverend Hale, to his credit, did not argue the point when it was put to him by Mr. Peterson, on behalf of the school board, who had taken a sudden and remarkable interest in the happiness of its schoolmistress. It was a Methodist ceremony performed by a circuit rider out of Laramie whom the Reverend Hale did not care for, and Josephine did not care that the Reverend Hale did not care. And that was the beginning and the end of the matter of the Reverend Hale. 41 people attended. Mrs. Dowd, of course, in a dress she had not worn since her husband's funeral, and which she complained about the entire afternoon. Cal Hester, who stood up with Vaughn, and whose eyes when Josephine came down the aisle between the children's desks that had been dragged out into the yard, did a thing Cal Hester's eyes had never before been caught doing in public. Eulalie Sims and her daughter Clara, who had spent a week sewing the small ring of white lace that went around the crown of Josephine's bonnet. Tommy Arden, who had grown half an inch over the summer, and stood at the back with his hat in his hand. All 19 of her students turned out in their Sunday best, because Josephine had said there was to be no wedding without them. Alden Rourke was not there. Alden Rourke had sold a quarter of his herd to settle his boy's legal troubles, and his boy was now in the territorial prison at Laramie on a sentence of 8 years, and Alden Rourke had not been seen in the town of Laramie since the Monday after the incident. And when he did at length return, he was a quieter man than he had been, and he did not cross Vaughn Daniels again, and Vaughn Daniels did not cross him, and the 2 men tipped their hats when they passed on the road, and that was the sum total of the peace between them, and it was enough. And Cornelius Calloway was not there. He had gone east on the Saturday morning train as Josephine had predicted, and he had written her exactly 1 letter in October, which did not ask for forgiveness, and did not offer any, and said only that the bank had been sold, and that he was retiring to his sister's house in Providence, and that she was not to contact him. Josephine wrote back a single sentence. I will honor your request, Father. She meant it. Edwin Crowell was not there. Edwin Crowell was in a courtroom in Suffolk County, Massachusetts, where Mary Halloran, the Irish cook, had at last given her testimony under oath, and where the second Mrs. Crowell's death was in the process of becoming something other than a misadventure. It would take 2 more years. Josephine would not attend the trial. She did not need to. She had done her part on a platform in Laramie, Wyoming on a summer afternoon, and what remained was not hers to carry. Henry Galt, attorney at law, sent a telegram of congratulation and a bank draft for $300, which Josephine used to buy a piano for the schoolhouse. Delia Daniels in Ohio wrote her brother a letter. It was the first letter he had received from her in 9 years. He opened it on the porch of the Rocking D with Josephine sitting beside him, and he read it twice without speaking, and then he handed it to her without a word, and Josephine read it, and her hand found his hand, and they sat on the porch a long while. The letter said in part, Brother, I have heard from a friend of our mother's that you are to be married in August to a schoolteacher from Boston who is a woman of considerable spirit. I send you my love and my blessing, and I ask if it is not too late whether I might come west for the wedding. I have wanted to write to you for a great many years. I did not know how to begin. A marriage seems to me as good a beginning as any. Your sister Delia. She came. She stood up with Josephine on the 29th of August under the cottonwood trees of the Laramie schoolhouse yard. She was a thin woman of 26, with a quiet voice, and she and Josephine became over the following months and years the kind of friends that only women who have survived certain things can become with one another, and she did not go back to Ohio. She stayed on at the Rocking D and taught school alongside Josephine, and married in the spring of the following year a young doctor who had come out from Philadelphia, and she named her first daughter Ruth. Omanishe. Josephine Calloway Daniels taught school in Laramie for 31 years. She raised 3 children of her own in the house on the Rocking D and 2 of her husband's Hans' children after their mother died of the fever in '84. And the youngest of these last, she sent east to Harvard College in 1902, on money she had saved herself from her schoolmistress's salary dollar by dollar over a period of 11 years. She was buried in 1931 at the age of 77, beside her husband who had gone before her in the winter of 1926. The stone she chose for herself was plain, and it bore her name and her dates, and beneath the dates a single line she had written out in her own hand for the stonecutter. It read, "She chose." And that is the whole of it, and it is enough, and it is the truth. Because in the end it was not the cowboy who saved her, though he stood in the street and in the schoolhouse and in the jail and on the platform of the Laramie Depot, and though he would have stood in any other place, she needed him to stand until the day he died. And it was not the town that saved her, though the town at last came round to her, as towns sometimes will when a woman gives them long enough to see her plain. And it was not even the law that saved her, though the law in the hands of Marshal Albert Kinney, and in the ruined conscience of Porter Kyle, and in the testimony of an Irish cook in a Boston courtroom, did what the law on its best days is capable of doing. What saved Josephine Calloway was Josephine Calloway. Sean. It was the word no spoken into the dark of a narrow room in a narrow boarding house on her first night in a strange town. It was her own 2 feet walking into a church whose pulpit had just shamed her. It was her own signature on a bond, and her own wire to a marshal, and her own hand holding a jealous man's face through the bars of a cell. It was her own voice, steady on a depot platform, saying the name of a dead woman to a man who had killed her. And the cowboy did not show her how love was meant to feel. She had already decided what love was meant to feel like alone in the dark, in a little room above a kitchen in Laramie, Wyoming on a summer night, when she had not yet known his Christian name. The cowboy only had the great good fortune to meet a woman who had already done the work, and to be the kind of man who recognized her when he saw her, and to have the sense for the rest of his life to stand beside her and not in front of her. A person's worth is not assigned, not by a father, not by a town, not by a pulpit, not by a pistol in an alley, not by a cowboy however good. A person's worth is claimed. It is claimed in small rooms and in public streets in the word no, and in the word yes, in the choosing, and in the choosing, and in the choosing again. Josephine Calloway claimed hers on a summer afternoon in 1878 in the dust of a western town in front of everyone. And she never gave it back.